Hello, Jared. My name is Allwell. It's my pleasure speaking to you today. I have been looking forward to this moment, and hopefully, we can have a very interesting conversation about your winning the prize and what you think about writing in general. So, first of all, tell us about you. How are you? How are you feeling today? How is the lockdown in South Africa, and how has that affected you?
The lockdown has been challenging. I've tried to just I guess, stick to a routine and do things that would just help my mental health. Some days it's just I must just be kind to myself and just take it easy, you know. You can't always just be, because sometimes you feel like you should be, you know, doing so many things now that you have all this free time and you stuck at home. But honestly, it's harder than people say. Yeah.
Okay, and
But I'm managing.
okay, yeah, you're on the master's program now, right?
Yes, I am.
So you're having to do the whole studying from home and all of that.
Yeah, and our seminars via Zoom,
Oh,
which is also very weird. Like the first few weeks were weird for me, because you like sitting for like 4 or 5 hours at a time, so it can get a lot sometimes. Yeah,
uh,
but
okay,
we've gotten used to it so far.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, of course. At some point you get used to it, but hopefully that's not like going to become the norm.
yeah.
Becomes the normal sometimes. Okay, so as I said at the start, I have just a few questions because obviously everyone wants to hear from the winner of the prize. Um, the first question I have for you is, how did you hear about the prize, and at what point did you decide, okay, I'm going to try this, I'm going to enter this competition?
Well, I think I saw the prize, the posting for the prize in two places. Was one on, I think, on brittle paper, and
Okay.
then I was in a short poetry writing course last year, and my coordinator, her name's Philippa, she actually posted it on her WhatsApp status, and then it's sort of like the universe was telling me to enter this because I was seeing it pop up everywhere, and I was like, okay. And it was weird because I had just finished Good Help is Hard to Find, not knowing where I was going to send it to, and then this popped up, and then I saw the theme was love, and then I was like, oh well, yeah, it kind of like fits, like it works. Let me just send it through, not really thinking much about it, just like going on a hope and a prayer that it would do well. But yeah, that's basically
Okay,
how it happens.
so in essence, you had a story waiting. Do you usually have these stories, like collections of stories? Just do you write often and have these stories just waiting, whereby you can just enter them into a competition, or do you write for specific competitions sometimes?
It's both actually. Sometimes I'll have an idea that really interests me and I want to explore it, and I'll write it not knowing where it's going to land up. And then just like seeing a post of something and say, so this is the theme, and it's like, oh, okay, well, this fits with this story or that story. And then other times I'll see a competition come up, and then that will sort of tune my mind into like thinking about something to put to that theme. So it happens both ways for
Both
me,
ways, okay.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah. You also mentioned the name that I sort of picked up, Philippa. She was on the long list, I think.
Yes, she was. She was, yeah.
How did you feel about that? I mean, seeing she's just your tutor, I think. How did you feel about that?
Yeah, she was. She took me for a short poetry course, so I felt like super validated. I was like, wow, okay, this is like someone I also look up to, especially in poetry. And I was like, wow, okay, this is great. Like also more South Africans on the list and people that I looked up to, because I also recognized other names on the list, like Remy from Namibia, on the long list. And it's like, okay, this is like a cool selection of people. So it was really cool. Yeah.
Okay, I think that takes me on to the next question. So you recognize these names, this cool collection of people, and how does it feel to emerge at the top? Like you won the prize. I mean, over 400 people entered into this competition, and you came out tops. How does that make you feel?
Hey, it's it's quite an emotion. It was quite an emotional moment for me, I must be honest, because I don't know, as like being a writer is always like being this thing in my mind, and I have this thing also about like, you know, achieving and being validated and stuff, and when the announcement came, it was just like, did this really happen? Like you always dream of it happening, and then it's like, did this really happen? Because I was playing Xbox in my room, playing video games, and I knew the announcement was coming, and I had checked it throughout the day, and I was just like, just leave your phone and stop checking. You'll know when you know, you know. And then I went on the website and scrolled down, and I saw my face, and I was just like, no ways, this is intense. And yeah, I just like also sort of went from there. Actually, I didn't actually want to, when I first found out, I didn't want to like post about it for like that, because I found out in the evening. So I didn't want to post about it in the evening. I just want, let me just take this in, and I'll like deal with the social media part of it or whatever on the weekend or something like that, you know. I just wanted to really take it in because it was surreal actually.
So I know this started at the start of the lockdown, I think. How did you celebrate? Did you get to celebrate this?
No, I haven't. Haven't gotten to go out and celebrate because I think we had just gotten into lockdown. Yeah, when it came out, so I haven't gotten to celebrate. But at least, I mean, I live with my parents, so it was sort of a celebration here. We bought champagne and we celebrated and we toasted, and yeah, we try to make do with what we have.
Okay, fantastic. I know it's not been very long ago, but how would you say that winning has changed your life in any way? And if so, how?
I think it's definitely given me confidence in myself because I think as a writer, sometimes you do have these voices of self-doubt in yourself.
Yeah.
And I think it's also taught there's this certain feeling when you know that you're writing something good. And I felt it when I wrote the story. It's sort of like a feeling of joy, of not enjoyment and fascination with what you're working on. And it's, I guess it's sort of attuned me to that feeling, how I sort of know that I'm on the right track with something, if that makes sense.
It
Like this
sure
is
makes.
feeling good to me. Yeah, this is a good, yeah.
Okay. Right. So I mean, the first edition was on love, and as you would know, we are set to launch the second edition of the prize. What would you suggest as a theme?
Oh wow. Ooh, that's a hard question. What would I think the next theme should be? Mm-mm-mm. I think, well, I'm always interested in things to do with sort of the mind, so like consciousness or memory or things along that lines, things to do with psychological sort of phenomena. That interests me a lot in my writing. So it would interest me if there was the next something around memory or I don't know, identity or perception of others, or if that makes sense. Like, yeah, things along those lines.
Memory
Quite
identity.
interested to see
Okay.
what people come up with. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. I will
Yeah.
probably consider those. Okay, so let's move on to your writing. Just a few minutes on how you write, what you take into consideration, and possibly a word or two for aspiring writers. So, when did you start writing, and what got you into writing?
I first started writing in high school. Um, I started writing poetry in high school. I had a really amazing English teacher, Miss Rue, and she would take my poetry like after class and critique it and say like try this, and she'd give me feedback and she'd like slip me poetry books, from her personal library. So I was like the teacher's pet when it to English class. But I always say that writing started for me from my negotiation of my sexuality as a queer man. Um, it was a way. It was like I retreated to the page to sort of get out all these feelings on the page. And a lot of that writing was very like confessional poetry, just really just writing out my feelings and seeing where it took me. And I think the interest in writing started from there, because then I started to see the ways you could play with language, the ways you could create your own meanings in language and write back to things that you didn't agree with in the world, or even sort of break down or deconstruct things that you don't agree with, or create something completely new that had never been thought of before. Yeah, so that's where the interest started for me.
I think that's really interesting. And I see you've mentioned poetry a few times. So you write poems as well as
Yes, I
short.
do. I started writing poetry. I think my first short story was, gosh, I can't even remember that one. Oh, my first short story was in undergrad, actually. I wrote it in
Okay.
undergrad, yes, yeah.
Okay, so you write poems, you write short stories, you write maybe even novels. Which one do you love the most? Are they interconnected in any way, do you think?
Yes, I like to think that they are interconnected. It's sort of like, and they feed into each other and they help each other. For me, I see them being sort of different. I know Margaret Atwood sort of speaks about them like they're like different wavelengths of thought. So like poetry would be like a shorter wavelength of a very condensed emotion and sensory experience, whereas short story is a bit longer and I want to say a bit more fleshier because it's to do with people mostly, whereas poetry doesn't always have to do with people per se or other people. Um, and then novels, which I'm still trying to like get my head around, and how that fits into the mix because I'm working on like my first novel right now. Is something that's a lot more challenging. It's a longer wavelength of thought. It's a lot of moving parts, and it almost brings together poetry and short story into the novel because I think me practicing poetry and short stories was almost like a stepping stones to writing a novel, or to at least attempting to write a novel. Yeah.
Interesting. So poetry and short stories as a stepping stone to.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. How long does it take you to write a short story?
Whew. It could take me, I want to say, if I'm really focused, it can take me a week to write a short story. Although, if you want to include the editing process into it, it could be 2 weeks. With this particular, with Good Help Is Hard to Find, the story that won, I sort of wrote it in sections. I would write the section and then leave it for a few days and then come back. Um, and then when it got near the end, I sort of got more excited to finish the story. So then I would return to it in consecutive days.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, it also depends on how the story is feeling to me. If I feel like I've sort of hit a dead end, or like I'm forcing the writing too much, I can just like maybe leave it for a few days and do something else. So it's also has to do with like how the story is flowing. Yeah.
Okay. So some stories you finish quicker than others.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
And you mentioned the editing process. Can you tell us a bit about it? How do you get your stories edited? You get people to read them and
Sometimes, yes, sometimes I do get people to read them. Although sometimes, if you entrust the story to a friend and they disagree with something that you really like, it can cause tension, I've learned.
Oh,
But
really?
I think that's all part of like sort of putting yourself out there and
Mhm.
taking criticism as a writer, especially. But a friend of mine suggested to me that it's better to actually print out the stories or the poems or whatever that you write and read it on a printed page than on a screen. And I found that to be quite helpful because on a screen, I don't know how or why, but your mind sort of skips over things that you don't really notice. Whereas on a page, you can actually see how the words are showing on a page, and you actually pick up on a lot more about in grammar, but also in just the style and what's working, what's not, easier than on a screen for some reason. At least for me, it's easier.
Yes, I
Yeah.
mean, I think I've heard that as well. I don't know. Maybe it's something to, I mean, maybe we zone out when we look at the
Yeah,
screen.
I don't know what it is with the screen. It's sort of like the mind sort of fills
Yeah.
in the blanks or whatever. Yeah.
Okay, so most times you just write your stories and then you read through it again. You print them out and then you read through
And
them.
then yeah, and then I'll edit it with a pencil and then return. And
Mm.
then maybe if I really want to tighten up the story like I did recently with another story, I do like a second print again and I read it again on a with a new draft. So
Okay.
yeah, that's basically the process.
Okay. And do you have any special like writing routine or ritual? Like, do you need to go to the park or do you need to go to the cafe or do you write at night when everyone is sleeping? Anything like that?
I do find that if I exercise before writing, it
Mm.
can give me energy to write
Okay.
or like new ideas to write. It also depends on my energy level or if I have a lot of writing to do. So sometimes I would wake up and do yoga first in the morning or exercise in the morning, then write. Um, and then I'll alternate that. And then the next day I may write first and then exercise. Because I feel like especially as a writer or as writers that who use their minds a lot to do things, it's important to keep the mind healthy but also the body. Like they're not separate. They help each other. At least that's how I've sort of thought about it and sort of discovered in my own work. Like when I'm feeling good in my body, I'm able to really focus. Um, yeah, and produce
Okay. So that's
good stuff.
mind and body working together.
Yeah.
When you say exercise, is it cardio or running or
So it would be yoga. I find yoga helps,
okay.
and then cardio, and then also weights. That's
Wait.
my routine: cardio and some weights. Yeah.
Okay. Um, what for you makes a good story? And how do you know when you've written one?
A good story for me is a story that works on many levels, and you don't always see all the levels it works on the first read. So what I mean by many levels is you'll get the story, the narrative, but then there'll be sort of echoes of symbolism or different parts of the story that are speaking to each other that are not necessarily linked in a sort of chronological or plot way, but they're still speaking to each other, if that makes sense, through symbolism and metaphor, and echoes and resonances. So yeah, it's a story that works on different levels and that doesn't sort of give up its full meaning on the first read. It's like something that you have to return to
Mm.
really understand, to really get. And I find that a lot with one of my favorite writers, Zadie Smith. She just released a collection of short stories, Grand Union, and I'm actually reading through a collection this on the second time now, and each story that I'm rereading, I'm finding new things that I didn't pick up on before, and to me, that's really skillful craft and writing. Yeah.
Okay, so stories having deeper meanings that should not be, easily seen the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Um, what would you say are your writing goals? I mean, obviously you've just won a prize, but you probably have other bigger goals. What would you say as some of your future writing goals?
Um, I'd really like to be known as I want to say versatile writer. I want to be published in poetry, short stories, novels, plays and essays. So my goal is to sort of branch out into those spheres and get published in those spheres. Right now, the most important thing right now is the novel that I'm working on and trying to get that polished and out there. And then after that, I will look to maybe a short story collection, maybe one day an essay collection. I'm also working on a play intermittently. So I really want to diversify my writing as much as possible and not constrain myself to, oh, he's just a poet, oh, he's just a short story writer, if that makes sense. So I want to feed the different branches of what writing could do.
You want to be a complete writer.
Yeah.
Okay. So you don't have any preferences then for poetry or short stories. You do like them equally.
I do like them equally because I think they give different things. And they also, the different forms or mediums are conducive for different explorations. For example, a lot of my poetry is a lot of sort of, I want to say, speculative poetry. So I would like recently I've been speculating a lot about like space and death. Space is in outer space and stars and planets and death. And so I like to explore just ideas in poetry. Whereas the nice thing about short stories and novels is really getting to know the character, getting to know the world that you're building around the character. And then with plays, it's also a different format also because you're not only working with the characters, but you're thinking about how's it going to be experienced with the audience there. What's the design going to be like? What's the lighting? So there's always these different the mediums bring out different things from from the topic or from the idea that you have. Yeah.
Okay, certainly. I just asked you what your writing goals are. What would you say would be your greatest writing achievement? What would be your biggest goal?
My biggest goal.
Yes.
My most ambitious my most ambitious goal. You're gonna laugh at me when I say this. um I would love to win the Nobel Prize in Literature. I'm just gonna go there. Like, why not? Why, you know what I mean? Like, why not go for the biggest thing that you could possibly go for? And even if you don't get it, you're gonna land up somewhere, you know? So I just like it's always been like a major thing that I admire. People like Toni Morrison, Chinua Achebe, Wallace Inke. Yeah, that would be a great achievement.
The Nobel Prize, I think that's probably the pinnacle of it all, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And why not go for the pinnacle? They
Yes.
say, Kuleka Patuma, she says, she's a poet and essay. I don't know if you know her, but she says, what? Something about you have to have the courage. Something about the courage to dream. I must get this quote and send it to you. It's actually quite.
Okay. No, feel
quite
free. We can put it on the screen. You know when we.
Yeah.
Put the quote there. Oh, that's interesting. So the Nobel Prize. How about the Booker Prize?
Yeah, I mean that too.
Somewhere there on the list. Okay. I know you've already mentioned some writers, but which writer would you say has influenced you the most, or influenced your writing?
Ooh, which writers influenced me the most? The most. I want to say Margaret Atwood, and then a close second, Haruki Murakami.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to say. I read them. So I read Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami in in undergrad, and it's a story based in Japan, Tokyo, Japan, and it's a love triangle between university students, and it's just the most gut-wrenching love story I think I've ever read. And yeah, it's just one of those books that really changed my perception of how literature can make you feel also. Yeah.
I noticed you mentioned your undergrad a few times. You studied in the US, right, for your undergrad?
Yeah, at Alabama State University.
Okay. Did you think that influenced your writing in any way, studying outside of your home country? What
I,
impact,
th-
if any, do you think? Yeah.
I think it did, because when I was that side, it exposed me to, because I was in the South, it
Hmm.
exposed me to Southern literature. We did a lot of Southern Gothic literature as well. Um, a lot of focus on people like Toni Morrison, William Faulkner. Um, I think it exposed me to a different set of writers, but I still think that the trajectories maybe would have been the same if I had stayed in South Africa, that I would have still been where I am today as a writer. I just think it exposed me to a different set of writers, but also it took me out of my comfort zone,
Mm.
um, and sort of gave me really different experiences, um, that made me really uncomfortable, because when you're in a foreign country, you're so much more aware of yourself as being different.
True.
Um, yeah, and I think that I don't know how, but I know that's left impressions on me, as a writer, and I know it comes up, as a writer, and as it's also, sort of shaped the themes that I'm interested in as well.
Certainly, those experiential aspects
Yeah,
of, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, and you're studying English. You're also doing a master's now. So you've had this sort of formal training around English and creative writing. And all. Do you think those sort of formal training are important for the craft? Do you think we need those that writers need those formal training in writing and creative writing?
I don't think it's needed. I think especially in the technological age with the internet, the resources are there. You know, if you're really interested and you're dedicated and you want to pursue writing, there are so many amazing interviews on YouTube, for example, that that give advice from really amazing writers like Toni
Including this
Morrison, for
one.
example.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't think it's necessary. I think it's good for a writer to be in a community of writers, and I think that's what these programs offer. So even if you're not um, in these formal programs, I think it's important for writers to somehow find some sort of community. It doesn't have to be a big community, but even one other writer or another two or three. I think community is important for writers because it can be such an isolating and lonely experience. So to be able to bounce off ideas from off of another person and to be able to receive critique, which I am finding, um, to be also a growing and painful experience sometimes, because it can cut you down to size very quickly. Um, but I don't think it's necessary. I think if you really have an interest and passion for it, and you read widely, and not just read, but you take your time to read something. So you'll read maybe a short story that has really impacted you, and you take your time to figure out, okay, what is this writer doing? Where, what are the techniques they're using? Where are the maneuvers? And maybe the formal training allows you to see that more clearly, because you can see, okay, what your teacher is showing you, maybe. Or maybe if you could seek out a mentor writer to show you those kind of things. But I think it's also with practice. Because sometimes when I first started out, I used to read poems and not know what the hell the poet is talking about. But I wouldn't let that bother me. I just read it and like put it
Just right
down. It's
on.
like, okay, yeah, I'll come back to that later. And like now after a while, I'll read a poem and it won't um deter me if I don't understand everything right away. But I'll take my time with it, if that makes sense. And eventually I'll be able not to maybe put together what the poet intended, but I'll be able to find my meaning in the
Your
poem.
own meaning. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think the short answer, I don't think it's completely necessary. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. And talking about finding your own meaning, I was discussing with one writer recently, one of the shortlisted writers, and she said she doesn't like her stories. She doesn't like interpreting her own stories. She likes the readers to have their own varied interpretations of her
Mhm.
stories. Do you feel that when you write that your stories are open to different interpretations as well, or do you have one specific meaning attached to it?
I mean, I definitely would, when I'm writing, I'd have my own interpretation to it, but I'll never impose that on readers or what people say they see in it. It like goes back to what I said earlier about like a story working on many levels that even you don't even see, because you could be working out your own unconscious issues
Mm.
in a story that you don't
That
see,
you don't see.
and another person picks up on that and say, oh, this is, especially if it's like a close friend, because I've had that happen to me as well, where a close friend reads a story and then they see something of myself
In
that
the
I
story.
didn't see. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, we'll wrap up just one or two more questions. What would be your advice to emerging writers
Da, da, da.
or aspiring writers
Good,
or young
good
writers?
advice to admiring writers. I don't want to say what everyone usually says.
Yeah, no cliches. I'm very original.
You know? Hmm. My advice. The best advice that I could get. I think the best advice would be, I want to say have fun. Like writing is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be playful. You're like, yes, it's a serious thing, but I think sometimes we get bogged down in the seriousness of it. I think if we remind ourselves that like it is an artistic craft, yes, but there's still a level of play and enjoyment that has to happen for creativity to flow, and an artist, Alan Watts says this actually, an artist is a good artist is skillful at deliberate play. So they know how to sort of bring out that playfulness in them in order to create something. And I think as a writer, if you follow that trade of thought, whether it leads you into magical realism or naturalistic writing or speculative fiction, follow that play, that interest in yourself. And I don't think you can go wrong if you follow what you enjoy.
Okay, that's
Okay,
certainly
that's
original. Have fun. Have fun. That's a good one. And finally, what is the next step for you? What is the next thing we're going to be hearing about Jared? What's the next big thing?
Whew. Hopefully the announcement of my novel to be published.
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully. The next other thing. I mean, yes, I'll still be submitting to short story competitions. So hopefully we'll see if other prizes come up.
Yeah.
Um,
I think you were shortlisted for a few others as well in the past.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, so I'm always going to be shooting my shots out there and seeing
Certainly.
what comes out.
Shooting for the stars and space, like you write about. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, And also just like also keeping my feet on the ground and staying grounded and humble. Amidst the affirmations that I receive. Especially from this competition, it's been like so overwhelming. You know, all the affirmation, it's just been like a reminder to me also to like, okay, this is great, but let's just remember to keep our feet on the ground. You know, there's always more to learn. You know, you don't know everything. So yeah.
Okay. I think I've run out of questions. So yeah, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your time. As I said, I was looking forward to this conversation, and I think we've had a very fruitful one. If I remember anything, I'll wake you up later for another chat.
Okay, cool. We have
So
a few
thank you
hours.
so
I only
much.
go to bed at like 11.
No worries at all. Thank you. And I hope you enjoy the rest of, I don't know, the extended holidays or lockdown that you have.
Yeah, I will try. I hope you stay safe. And thank you. I really enjoyed this interview. It was nice.